Good morning here in the Western Hemisphere. Good afternoon, good evening, wherever you might be. Thank you for joining us. Marketing is such an important function for all of us. Sales is number one. Marketing is right up there. As an executive throughout my career, uh, originally a chemical engineer, but thrown into a big company's a machine to grow the firm. I ended up always being part of the sales and marketing function and doing both over the years. I never really knew what I was, other than we got to grow. And so, how do we grow internationally? And that's been my task the last 40 years internationally. The anniversary of that is going to be 40 years in January, my first trip to Korea. And throughout that, there's always been a mix of business development, marketing, sales. We're going to hear today from experts in a variety of areas involving that, including cross-cultural expertise as well, because when you're doing it internationally, it's more than just listening and understanding someone who's could be a buyer. You've got to get the questioning built around the culture. And so I haven't looked at all the people that are here yet, but I will in the next bit. But I know in the last few days, one of our members reached out and was looking for some help with hiring someone who knows the Japanese economic development community. And so I recommended someone who is as good as any. He's an amazing leader, happens to be an American, but he spent 25 years in the Japanese system, in the Japanese government system, and the consulate system. And so as I made the recommendation, I started thinking about him and his style. And I relate to it probably like Steven Strittmatter as well, who is one of those people in between. And maybe many of you can relate to this. What culture are you? I'm German, Polish, American. And then I never really felt part of any of those, kind of. And then when I started to go to Japan and felt like I was like part of that, or traveling to different countries, I felt like I was part of that. And now, of course, with Global Chamber, I feel part of the global tribe. But what nationality, what culture am I? And so this, going back to this Japanese fellow or this American fellow who could help this American company, I was thinking about someone asking him questions about Japan and really getting to something that can help them. And what I was thinking was, I know how he is. I've been working with him for almost 20 years, 15 plus years, and he is very Japanese. He looks American, but he thinks Japanese. And so I've learned how to ask him questions and what he's saying and not saying to be able to really understand what's going on. Any other, like a clean American who didn't have any cross-cultural skills, would be befuddled, would have no idea what he's talking about, and probably would walk away very frustrated, like, wow, okay, well, he doesn't want to cooperate. And actually, it reminds me of something else that happened this week. There was another person, Canadian, who was he frustrated with? He was frustrated with an African within our community and how that African had behaved in setting up a meeting. And it reminded me of something that Karina Gitz had mentioned about working in the Middle East. And if there's any place in the world that I'm least comfortable with, it would be the Middle East, but I at least understand it intellectually. And so she talked about a story where she ended up having a meeting in the Middle East and the person didn't show up. Didn't show up for 2 hours. And she ended up hanging on, and the person ended up showing up, and they ended up having a long conversation, going to dinner, and there was a business development actually done. So in terms of that's all cultural stuff. It's like his reaction, the Canadian's reaction to me was, how could this person be so rude to do these things? And what he described in a contextual standpoint especially from a Swiss or German or kind of more of one of those cultures, was rude. He showed up late, but it really wasn't that late. The other day, or actually also earlier this week, I had an appointment with someone. I think it was like 6 a.m. or something my time. He didn't show up. I sent a message like, "Hey, are you around? Is this still good?" I just hung on the line because I just thought, well, I just kept it open. And 45 minutes later, he showed up and apologized, and we had a great 15-minute meeting. I, so so why am I saying this? So Christina Wachter is here, and I thought it would be good to start the framework of marketing around culture because all of these are important aspects of not only understanding culture from a marketing standpoint, because there's so many cultures. There's also so many layers of age groups in the world. And there's so many other layers of how people might perceive whatever you have, and from a marketing perspective or from a sales perspective. And so if you really thought about it, it's so complex, you'd probably give up. So you can't give up. So what's important? What's important is knowing what you have, valuing what you have, and then articulating who your best client is. One of the things and why I was late, I had a couple different ideas, but one of them was accountability for members of Global Chamber. What are members really accountable for? And I think one of those things is understanding who your best clients are. That's essential for any of us running our business. It's essential for us to understand that because that drives what introductions we provide. It gets Globy thinking, oh, you want to meet those people. Here's who you need to meet. In Global Chamber, most members know. And certainly after we keep asking, who would you like to meet? They understand that. There's nothing more important in marketing. Nothing more important in marketing than understanding who you want to meet. Where are they? What are their at? Who do they look like, man or woman, and how do they think? And what are those are all important. And then you layer in the cultural aspects. If you've got an offering that is kind of a little bit laid back, the way people might respond to that culturally will impact who your best clients are. And so, Christina, if you don't mind, and you are here, aren't you? Should have.
Yes, I am here. Yes, on my little screen. I'm right above you. In fact, I'm the little person above you on this. So yes, I am here, back from Greece, freshly set foot back in the United States,
Your
and
pictures were amazing. Congratulations. How long were you there?
2 weeks, and not nearly long enough. But it's such a tremendous place to do research, to have fun with my family, and as you suggested, Doug, to eat. So it was just a tremendous feast that I had of all sensory levels there in Greece, which I think is what we look at in marketing because we're looking at scaling visibility, but we have to touch on all five senses in order to do that and tap into emotions while we're looking at these. So what I just wanted to touch on a couple of things that I've learned in the last couple of weeks because we're always learning. You talk about accountability. Accountability is an evolving process. We have to learn to pivot. We have to learn to be flexible continually. And one of the things that I rely on always in terms of building my business, in terms of finding out about a place, is getting to know people, making human connection. And one of the most lucrative parts of my trip, really, in terms of building my business and building my own personal knowledge, was meeting a man who was on I met him on Milos, the Greek island of Milos, but he was from a variety of different islands. He had lived in many Greek islands, on many Greek islands throughout his life. And he was, fortunately for me, he was fluent in English. And so, given my very limited Greek vocabulary, it helped. But he knew the history of Greece so well. And I learned so much from him in terms of how to deal with people. I'm working with actually a person in Africa who's expanding her businesses into Athens and a couple of other European cities. And so I was looking at the history of Greece and how that comes into play and how that will affect my client's marketing. And she's a very knowledgeable person. She has lived and worked all over the world, but she has had a very superficial level of actual cultural interaction with people throughout her past career. But now that she's expanding into some franchising and other things, she needs to expand that. So what she was asking of me is learning cultural agility in the various places where she's expanding this franchise, and one of which is Athens, as I mentioned. And talking to talking to this man, Kostas, he he talked so much about how past patterns of Greek behavior and Greek history affect current Greek marketing, how Greece still functions according to the same standards that they did centuries ago. And one of the most interesting patterns that I looked at, and this is again, we look at patterns of behavior to establish levels of trust culturally, but Kostas mentioned this Greek practice of looking at foreigners as sources of opportunity. And actually, this goes back to Plato and Plato's discussion of the ideal society. You cannot live in isolation. You have to bring resources in from other cultures. And so, what you have to do is respect the other cultures and welcome them. And so, Kostas was talking about this pattern of looking at what he said, foreigners coming into a particular business, welcoming foreigners into your business. And it was so interesting to see how that would provide opportunity, growth, establish trust based on mutual respect, this concept of welcoming. And I watched it very closely throughout the other uh, exchanges that I had in Greece, even going to a store, a merchant throwing in a bar of soap, or at a restaurant, the host in Arcanes, for example, on Crete, the most wonderful feast we had. We were way too full to have dessert, but they still brought dessert to us. We were not charged for this, but it was the most memorable feast, and creating sustainable relationships, taking just that little element of bringing something to the person that you're welcoming into a place is something that has been going on in the expansion of the Greek economic portrait for so very long. And that's something that we can learn from and look at what they're doing and why they're doing it. So in expanding a business into Greece, again, going for this recent example, you would not go without a gift, without an appropriate gift. An appropriate gift as you're going into this society would not be a mug with your logo on it. It would have to be something that is reflective of your culture and history. So when you're looking at the process of exchange and marketing, you're looking at respect and building trust through human connection. And you have to have an understanding of history and how the history comes into play in terms of establishing today's game book, how our playbooks are established. We draw on our history. Look at the collective history of Greece. I saw this on the mainland. I saw this on the islands. This pattern of welcoming foreigners that had been in place for centuries in Greece, centuries upon centuries, going back to Plato's time. And so this is what we have to have an understanding of the human side of business. And this is what I love to look at. And I could keep going on with the lessons that I've learned, Doug, in just the last 2 weeks. But we have to understand the humanities. We have to look at the art. What is representative of the art in terms of how commerce is exchanged and how it has been processed throughout the centuries. Let's look at languages and how the use of language is brought into play. Now, Doug, I'm going to put you on the spot right now. Let's hear you say good morning in Greek.
I was I'm not sure, but I know how to say crooked foot, kutsopodi.
You
And
don't start with
Christos Anesti, Happy Easter, Christ is risen. So there are a few things that I don't
okay,
morning.
Ganymedes. And I worked on that pronunciation for the entire time that I was there. And finally, when I was getting onto the ferry to head back to Athens to go on the airport, I was told that I pronounced that like a Greek person
All
actually
right.
did. It took me 2 weeks to get the pronunciation right. But it didn't matter when I was saying calamatas and I was pronouncing it differently. The point was I was doing what Greek culture does in terms of greeting the people that I was working with. And then they would help me through this. And then I could ask questions. That opened the format to ask more questions about expanding our conversation, expanding our relationship, how my client could grow her business with particular people. It started with something as simple as a greeting, and even the mispronunciation of the greeting opened a door to communication. And it established trust, and also it helped me to ask questions. And so I think the biggest part of marketing that I want to touch on today is understanding the history of a people in terms of understanding their culture. Look at practices that have been in place for centuries in order to be able to expand the current conversation. That is just one of the elements of cultural understanding that really comes into play. And we're working with a group in Africa right now, a Pan-African group, and we're looking at how the differences in various African countries are affecting how we're addressing women's issues that we are dealing with on a demographic level. So, understanding differences, yet also collective similarities of the human race, are what we need to tap into and asking questions. But get at the history, look at historical clues that are given through linguistics, through art, through daily life and sports and everything that you have, and find that commonality. Then you're able to go through what I call the culture spin method and understanding self, people, and immerse yourself to take it to the next level. That's my that's my topic for today. I just had an incredibly rich understanding of the Greek culture, which Kostas in particular helped me jumpstart. So by talking to him, I was able to develop a huge understanding of some other things that I needed to know for my business while in Greece.
Fantastic. The Costas factor sounds like it's going to be impacting you and your business for quite a bit. I think probably a lot of what Christina talked about resonates with many of you. I see Lulu as an example in this room who has a very multicultural background in London. So I'd love to hear from all of you in this next. We have about 30 minutes left. And I'd like to open up the floor. Marissa is another one, and probably Marissa, if you're available, I'd like to go to you next. I do want to bridge to Marissa or whoever is next in our conversation with just a brief story about Greece that illustrates, Christina, the story you just told. When we were visiting near Koutsopovi, which is the town where my wife's family is from. It's near Argos and Naplion and that part of the Peloponnesian Peninsula. There was a fellow on the side of the road selling oranges, and I stopped the car to purchase some, and he was smoking a cigarette. Our daughter was young, and I got out of the car, and he gave me a cigarette, which I don't smoke, but I took the cigarette, and there we were on a mountaintop watching the blue sky, and you could see the bay with all the blue ocean. And there I was smoking a cigarette with a fellow purchasing some oranges. And I got back in the car with the bag of oranges, and my daughter yelled at me. It's like, Dad, you should not be smoking, and she was quite irate with my behavior. And I didn't know how to explain what you just described, which was I was basically bridging his culture, right? I was coming into something that was important to him. I've seen foreigners deny a gift, frozen squid, for instance, once in Japan, where I was hosting a DuPonter, and he declined a very special that the chef actually had done something very special, and he declined it. It's like, oh my God, it's like not good. So I couldn't decline a cigarette, and I had to do it. And it's maybe a hard concept. I don't even really know how to articulate that completely, but it's something that is important. And you just talked about how important it is to embrace a culture, don't be judgmental. Having one cigarette or a couple puffs of a cigarette in the long run is probably not going to kill you, but it will allow you to create a bridge to a culture. And that allowed me to bridge. By the way, the end of the story was we got back to the hotel in Napoleon, into an amazing hotel built into the mountain overlooking the bay there. And the oranges were from Florida and they were moldy. So my Greek experience in that particular case, the purchasing agreement did not work well. He did his job. He all it cost him was one cigarette, and he got some overcharge for some oranges that were moldy from Florida. But nonetheless, I thought they might be from Greece.
Okay, but
Mar-
look at the connection you made and look at the positive impact or, the positive nature that you presented to this man. And he probably remembers that now.
I think all of us have done that, right? We've all bridged and not been judgmental, whether it's food or some sort of behavior by someone, and just kind of accepted it. This Canadian example I mentioned earlier, by just like, okay, you're 15 minutes late to the meeting, but I'm going to give you grace. I'm going to allow this to occur. The Lulu knows that, and maybe most of you know, things like Franz Trampenar's Riding the Waves of Culture, and all those books, and even your book, Christina, talking about how to think about different cultures. It allows us to be less judgmental and more just understanding that people are coming at things from a different perspective. And Marissa, you know that very well. Is there anything here that resonated with you from a marketing perspective, and anything that you would like to share and build on what Christina's talked about? Are you available
Sure,
to speak?
sure. Thank you so much. And Christina, thank you so much for that incredible introduction to what you're going to talk about. I've been very blessed to serve Greece as well. In my case, it has been remote, just a couple of different IT Greek companies that have a few team members outside of Greece. So I am yet to visit in person and have the puff on the streets. But absolutely, Doug, I couldn't agree more with everything that you and Christina have said. And I'm sorry that my camera is like doing something weird with lighting. I apologize about
Oh,
that.
wow. Yeah. For
Yeah, it's
real.
like dark. I have a lamp here, and for some reason my camera is acting out. But the only thing that I could add, because I agree 150% with everything that has been said, is that I think it's also equally important to when we do business, when we want to do marketing outside of our culture, we need to first understand our own culture. And we need a lot of awareness of how that culture that you're trying to understand and learn, and I couldn't agree more with learning history, among many other things, right, of the others. I think it's very important to start with the self. And how is it, let's say in this Greek example, how is it that the Greeks perceive Americans, for example, right? If you are coming from the United States, or here in the US we're so diverse. I am a Mexican American, so I was born and raised in Mexico. I am fluent in Spanish and French, and I'm still learning English, and I speak a little bit of Brazilian Portuguese. So I'm blessed that Greek pronunciation is quite easy for me, because of my first language being Spanish. So, and everyone and their grandmother is Costas, right? Costas, Andreas. In Greece there is a lot of diversity of first names, and the last names can be quite tricky because they're very long, Papadopoulos, right? So understanding the self, understanding your own cultural filters and biases, I think is basic. And of course, I mean, the order perhaps doesn't change as that much, but I think even before trying to understand the other, it is critical to understand the self. And how is it that the cultures that you represent or the cultures that are in you, and filter your own judgments of what's professional, what's appropriate, what's respectful to the point of punctuality, right? How do you see that in your own culture? And then learn about the other and have that awareness, because I think that helps individuals be less judgmental, because in our own cultures we all have just weird behaviors in our own cultures. All of us, no one is really exempt from behaviors or traditions or practices that are seen by other cultures as different or rare. And I think it's very important to be aware of that as you continue your efforts. Not only to, I mean, marketing is, I agree that is extremely important. I have a controversial thought that it should be under HR. Ooh, I think marketing belongs to the big HR umbrella. But I think that marketing, successful marketing, of course, leads to closing the deal and finally getting to serve that client, and therefore hopefully a long-term relationship, business relationship, of course, depending on your own culture and your values and what's important to you. So that would be my only piece that I would add, because what you guys said, everything was perfect.
Great. No, that really great adds to that. And you touch on, as Christina did, on history and understanding the context. One thing about Greeks is, obviously, I guess, history is incredibly important. And there's an amazing Greek history, but the thing to remember about that is they respect their own history and expect others to do that as well. They um, my wife, kind of a weird religious kind of a comment, but she's very proud as a Greek American that Mormons are the least successful of any country in the world in Greece in terms of converting people. And that's very natural to understand because Greeks are Greek Orthodox. If you're Greek, Greek Orthodox. By the way, I'm Greek Orthodox because to marry my wife, I had to convert to Greek Orthodox to get married. The big fat Greek wedding story is kind of our story. And so she doesn't understand how anyone could convert to a religion because you're born Greek Orthodox, and the history of Greece needs to be respected by anyone talking to anyone in Greece. Fernando, how is your Greek? What Melissa says is that, by having Spanish background, that her understanding and pronunciation of Greek, like Kostas, which you did very well, is great. Have you interacted with very many Greeks? But you're a marketing guru, and so you understand all of that. Is there anything that you'd like to build on this conversation? I know you're an extraordinary marketing leader and always revolutionary in the thought process that you have.
Yeah, I haven't really interacted with Greeks in a marketing context, but it's interesting. Whenever I hear just in the background people who are from Greece speaking, for some reason I kind of turn my head because I think they're speaking Spanish, and then I suddenly okay, no, that's not Spanish, that's Greek.
Never made the connection. That's interesting.
Yeah, exactly. The whole thing about food is interesting because there are some other cultures that are very proud of their food because they know that people love it. And they sometimes use that. So now thinking about the global marketing from abroad to the United States, I had an Argentinian client that I was helping to establish their presence in the United States. And we kind of jointly came up with this idea of doing a small tour of a few cities in Texas, namely Dallas and Austin. I guess you could call that a two-city tour. And what we did was we decided to host these dinners for prospects at Argentinian restaurants to have a Argentinian churrascaria, right? So everybody, for some reason, Argentinian meat and the way they cook it, the churrascaria, the asado, the special way they cook it with the slow cooking with the wood is sort of globally recognized as like being top quality food. And so that was actually a really cool thing that we did, kind of bringing people into an Argentinian restaurant, ordering kind of like food for everybody, like what do you call I can't remember the names of the meats right now. I'm kind of like I'll remember it after we leave the webinar. It's so funny how the way how my memory bife de chorizo and different kind of asados, and it was actually really successful, really a real powerful way to make a physical presence, right? As opposed to just kind of relying on digital marketing. And the other thing that they started doing, we came up with the strategy as well, is just to sort of start going to all these different events, these trade shows, because what they do is they provide outsourcing for robotic maintenance and support, out of Argentina. And just being there and having a presence at all these different robotic shows, etc. And then when they were there, they would invite people to eat whenever they could. They'd find an Argentinian restaurant. People just loved it.
Hmm.
And now they've kind of established themselves successfully as kind of like the first outsourced robotic operational remote support that exists today, because that's a new and burgeoning market. But yeah.
You bring in the concept of if in one culture there's something that's important, and then connecting to other cultures, like the language connection between Greece and Spanish. I never would have even thought of that, but that's really an
When
interesting one. Food is an interesting one because we all can relate to it in some way, and it's important in so many different cultures. The city of Tucson, which is a member of Global Chamber, they've marketed that they're a gastronomy city. They were recognized by UNESCO as a unique culinary location, right being on the border with Mexico, and it's got its unique aspects to it. Great Greek restaurant in Tucson as well, called Athens. But they've marketed Visit Tucson, member of Global Chamber. They've marketed the city that way. So when you come to the city, they're pushing you into and certainly recognizing all the different places. And so it's a cross-cultural thought process around
mm,
food and language and values that I think are really interesting. And so Christina and Marissa, you both are very culturally aware. The marketing into different countries of whatever you have, recognizing some of these cultural similarities, where Malaysia and Singapore are very different countries from a standpoint of, I forget the characteristic it is, where the Swiss, if you're Swiss, you'll potentially report your brother for tax evasion, which a Malaysian would think would be unbelievable. How could you do that? Because they're so much more connected as a family. You would never put the state, the government, ahead of your family in Malaysia, but in Switzerland, you could. And so those kinds of cultural differences are so important. Stephen,
mm.
you understand that, being from the American
Yeah,
side and the German side. There are things
no,
that are aligned culturally, but there's some things that are quite a bit different.
yeah. I actually posted something in the chat, which I saw this a couple years ago. Very interesting. Um, it's called the Lewis model, and we've been my company where we gather basically once a year globally, and I've looked at that and sat in the room with all of our partners from the different countries, and you can actually go through and see. You'll see the closest are the Germans or Americans. If I'm looking at this um, from a cool point of view, you say USA, German, Swiss, Luxembourg, very cool, etc. And then you get into more emotional, the Latin countries, etc. And then more passive or reactive, the Asian. And on the scale, you can see, and like I said, I posted this into the chat, which you can sit in the room and actually observe this with a lot of different countries. Funny enough, when you were talking about the with Greek, you've spoken to Dimitri, the president of our Ames International, and when we had our global meeting in Athens a few years ago, which was very interesting. I didn't realize this. The grammar between Greek and German are actually identical.
Wow.
I didn't know that. I mean, if you're, it's like, okay, and supposedly it's easier for Germans learning Greek. I mean, I was
Hmm.
picked up a little bit on that, and it's like, oh my God, yeah, you're right.
So it's such a wealth of information to figure some of these things out and then to figure out what to do with it, right? From a market
Mhm.
perspective.
Well, from a marketing perspective, that actually is it's very important to know how will people look at this, and if you're doing a marketing plan or sales, I just had a call today with actually somebody we were talking about um, hiring salespeople in Belgium in the Flemish speaking part. And between Flemish and Holland, the language is almost identical. But one interesting aspect, you can hire, or when we're looking for Belgium, I've had this before. They said, yeah, hire a Flemish-speaking Belgian, but don't bring a Dutch guy to it. And I said, why is that? Um, Very simple from a cultural aspect. Even though the language is similar, the Belgian Flemish have more of a Latin touch. So when they're doing business, they'll go to lunch, they'll talk about everything except business. And that's how they're doing business. The Dutch guy will go in and want to dive into talking about whatever the deal is, etc. And they will fail. They'll go crazy because they want to talk about the business. And but you can it's easier to put a Belgian into Holland than it is to put a Dutch guy into Belgium, speaking Flemish, from a cultural aspect.
Interesting. So thank you for sharing that. I see that we have about 15 minutes left, and so I'd like to open up the floor for anyone else that has comments, anything you'd like to share. Today's topic at Global Chamber is marketing. I appreciate that we've spoken about a lot of different things that hopefully have given some thoughts on the marketing side. And I prefaced this all by saying marketing and sales, I've always kind of merged them together because the things like Stephen, you've just mentioned, understanding at that level creates that issue of who's my best client. And so I always ask that question when members join, or when all prospects, I ask that same question and I get all sorts of answers. And unfortunately, especially to prospects, the answer often is, well, anybody is my client. And then, after a series of questions, we start to get down. But
Mm,
the issues you guys have all raised, like that subtle thing, Stephen, you mentioned about the
mm,
Flemish and the Dutch, most people don't get to that level, right? And
mm.
that helps us understand who our best clients are, but it also helps with implementation of both marketing and sales. Lulu,
Mm.
if you're available, I'd love to hear your perspectives, but I'll just open it up to anyone who would like to share.
Yes, thank you, Doug, and good to see everybody. Greetings from the UK. Um, so I would like to share with you, if you remember when it comes to marketing campaign, many of you probably remember a few years back, HSBC did a whole series of campaign, particularly used posters along the airport, like the boarding bridge, called the World Local Bank, if you remember that. So the key point about coming to marketing the culture, uh, I would say the first principle is about different perspective. But you can compare. Well, I always say to people, you can compare the culture, but look at it from say how we do things differently. There's a term called ethnocentric, meaning that everybody in every culture assume that my culture is the best and the only culture. I think when we when we go out to work with our global colleagues and global clients, we need to really almost like a cage that beast inside of us. Because actually, yeah, my culture is just different from others. Some people eat with
Cage the
hands.
beast.
Some people eat with hands. Some people eat with chopsticks, and some people eat with a knife and fork. The only thing is different. I think it's really important to recognize it's all about different perspective and how we different culture view and read the same situation. it can be different. The other thing, when it comes to marketing, it's about understanding some cultural taboos, both in terms of color and also topics. I wrote a article on LinkedIn a few years back. It's actually a two real time story, three actually stories about the green and the hat in China, in Chinese culture. So we were doing a program in Pakistan. Pakistan is an Islamic country. Green is their color. So they want to make some visibility taps for the project with management. And I told them, don't do that. Particularly if you are working with Chinese partners, I said, because in China, if you give particularly a man a green cap, that's implying that his wife or girlfriend is cheating on him. So the same kind of a blunder was made by environmental groups visiting China. Again, they brought green cap as gift. So all those are quite important to do some homework. Simple things can make a huge difference. And also they talking about taboo subjects. We talked a lot about food, which is always nice, a subject to compare the culture. But I would steer away from the sore spot in any country's history or sensitive subject, because I can recall many times I was asked by people who I met the first time said, "What do you think China is going to do with Taiwan?" I was like, "I only just met you. Why do you want to ask this question?" So not a good way to make friends, right? So yeah, I'll stop here and thank you very much.
That's a heavy one. I saw your hand up there, Dan. Did you have something to share?
Sure. I just want to make a quick comment and
Welcome.
something, thank you, share something that I've experienced. What Christina was talking about, I think is really critical, the importance, obviously, of understanding those cultures and the differences. But I wanted to follow up with what Marissa said too, about the importance of knowing your own culture, and just take that one step further into kind of what is called the public self-awareness or social self-awareness, how people are perceiving you. And it's something I experience all the time being an American living in London. An American comes with a certain set of definitions and impressions on a lot of people. And I spent a lot of time trying to not be American, uh, quite honestly, and trying to fit into that culture, but being very aware of how people, particularly today, are perceiving Americans, across the rest of the world. And if you're aware of that, I think in your sales efforts and your marketing campaigns, it's so important to try to keep those things in mind as we speak and market to particular businesses abroad. And it's just something that I think is really, really critical. This self-awareness and social self-awareness and how we're being perceived. That's what.
Are there any examples that you're open to share how you're managing that? Because I'm finding that also, I'm puzzled by how to handle that.
Well, I could tell you, a lot of countries think Americans are very forceful and wanting to employ their techniques and strategies in other companies and I mean in other countries, saying this is how we do it in America, and here's the plan. Here's what you should be doing. Here's how you can do this. And a lot of Americans talk too much, and they don't listen enough. This is a perception that people in other countries have. So, not trying to force fit what happens in America to these other countries, trying to really listen and what's important to them, are things that I continually focus on, and they might be small. I mean, there are some other things as well. I mean, we speak the same English language, right? But we spell
Mhm.
the English differently. We have different phrases, and so when I work with American companies with marketing materials, we have to make them British, not American. Say things in a certain way, make sure the spelling is done correctly, because just the impression of the American way coming here and telling us how we should be doing things can be a turnoff. And that we
Mm.
need to be aware of that. And so, although I'm American and I think everything great is great in America, not everybody does. And trying to be sensitive to that. So that's
Marissa?
Yes, thank you. And thank you, Dan. Absolutely. I think in the intercultural or cross-cultural conversation, we refer to that as whether to flex or not to flex, right? So I do think that around the world, there might be definitely a reputation that Americans tend to be non-flexers, right? That they go to other countries, even as tourists, right? They go to Italy and they expect Italians to speak English, for example, or they expect to find, McDonald's in Greece, right? So yeah, I couldn't agree more that there might be a reputation out there. And yeah, that's a conversation that's like the $60,000 question, $60,000 million question nowadays, whether to flex or not to flex. And I couldn't agree more. In someone in the chat, when in Rome, I think it was you, Dan, or Stephen, when in Rome,
Mm,
right? Do as Romans. I don't know if that's how you finish the
yeah.
sentence, as
When
a
in
Mexican
Rome, do as
American.
the Romans do. Yeah.
When in
Okay,
Rome,
well,
do as the
a la
Romans do.
tierra que fueres, haz lo que vieres. We say in
Mm,
Spanish, right? To the land where you go, do as they do. And I think when it gets a little tricky is when it's remote and when you have several cultures represented. And I also think that it's never black and white. Even here in the US, we have an incredible cultural diversity that even inside the US, even if you're not doing business, international business, just to navigate the interculturality of the United States requires that type of intelligence if you want to have it, if you want to function that way. Here inside the United States, perhaps, and I connected, Dan, to the cultural, very strong cultural connection between the UK and the US. Right. I mean, the US is an offspring of the UK, along with Canada and Australia and New Zealand, right? So there is that interesting dynamic of the relationship between the UK and the US.
mm.
And I think that's another piece of the puzzle that you're talking about. But yes, I agree that flexing is very important. It's a sign of respect, as long, of course, as we are not, crossing boundaries. In here, probably I'm thinking of more extreme things, such as those cultures in which, for example, women don't work, women don't have a seat at the table, right? Where the market is male dominated. I mean, really male dominated, and there are very few women that work, right? So for me, as a woman of color, a woman of the global South in Texas, that's another component that I keep in mind. But yeah, I couldn't agree more with your point, Dan.
Not understanding that the culture can have massive financial consequences. I was on a steering committee with a company I previously worked at, and they were implementing a system for their personnel department. And then there were a lot of things that were going wrong. And I said, how are you doing the dates? Oh, normal, month first, then day, then year. And I said, well, a lot of countries don't do that. And they had a static system. Um, then you had different things in USA as 1.20. Well, a lot of Europe uses commas instead of a dot. And that can have a financial system or a consequence on the system for programmers. And that is cost several weeks and thousands of dollars to redo the system because they made it a static system because the programmers had never been out of the US.
For sure. Manoj, please go ahead. Thank you for joining today.
Yeah, okay. A very, very interesting conversations going on here, especially with respect to the culture. I come from India, so wherein individual brilliance is always, celebrated. That's how we've all been through that. Various institutions we've been through. I had the experience of being in Japan and then working for Japanese companies, wherein this is quite the contrary, right? Wherein collectivism weighs far more than individual brilliance, and then collectively accomplishing a certain objectives is far more than what an individual does on a certain time period. It's always a below collective accomplishment that comes where an individual brilliance actually comes into play. it's very interesting how in different countries different aspects are celebrated. So another cultural aspect I just thought I'll just put forward. Thank you so much. Wonderful conversation so far.
Thank you very much. We only have about 3 or 4 minutes left. Christina and Marissa and Stephen. Oh, Crum is here. Oh my goodness. So sorry, Crum. We missed you earlier. What would you like to share, please? Please go ahead.
I have a lot of contacts with different businesses in so many countries. So I think that in every country it's influenced the tradition and the people is very different for talking and for negotiations in every countries. Some of the countries, for example, with USA, this is not compliment. It's very easy to work because there are so many nations, so many influences. To work with American it's really nice and really good. With Japan also, the people have the tradition. The people have the good. They are very smart. They are very clever, very strict in negotiations. So this makes short the connection. But what I say and in my practice is with all the businessmen, it's good when you are on the table, and all good things it's stay on the table. This is from me.
Good comment. Fernando, please go ahead.
Yes, I just wanted to comment something. This is not really about business or anything, but there was this connection between Greece and people who speak Spanish during when Spain was expelling the Jews in around 1492. There was a large migration of Sephardic Jews to Greece. I thought that was an interesting connection. I learned about that when I was in college, and a Greek friend of mine that was in the dorm with me was telling me about that. And he was actually a Greek Jew who had come from his family line had been from Spain originally. About that. Just an aside.
Some of these migrations that have happened in history create some really interesting angles. And I think the point, and we'll need to close things down, is that the world is complex. And understanding a lot of this really helps us in our business, right? Because it creates, I think, us to be less judgmental about behavior. And so when I see international people being judgmental about showing up on time and a variety of other things, it worries me, but it also inspires me to continue what we're doing. And that is getting all of you who already get that and understand that out and get you connected to people so that you can help benefit their business and you subsequently benefit as well. Thank you for all of you for joining us today. This has been a marketing conversation, but it's really been a business conversation and a people conversation. And that's what marketing and sales and business is. It's people. It's understanding people. And by listening and questioning and asking again and connecting and caring and serving, all of those things lead to good things for them and for us. So thank you for your support and collaboration. Thank you for being part of the Global Tribe. Let's have a great Friday. Let's have a great weekend. And let's come back on Monday refreshed, inspired, and better, and global and unstoppable. Thanks, everybody. Take care.
Beautiful.
Good
Thank
weekend.
you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Happy Philippine Independence Day. Thanks, everybody.
Bye, everybody.
Thanks, Jen.
Bye-bye.
Appreciate it. Thank you, Lulu. Thank you for jumping in. We appreciate you.
Pleasure,
What
pleasure,
have you
always.
got planned for the weekend?
I
I heard it was raining yesterday, really hard.
No, it's warming up again. So we had
Oh.
a little heat wave a couple of weeks ago, reached 35. I think the whole country was melting.
Did you attend the Global Chamber London event on Thursday?
I couldn't go. Normally, it's challenging during the weekdays.
I see. Yeah, why
Yeah.
is that?
Well, I think the event is during the day, so I will have to take days off to do that.
Oh, I see. I got you. Okay, yeah, I think it was basically the afternoon, so that was more challenging. But what I heard, because normally that event on a rooftop, this one had it inside, and it was raining quite hard apparently on Thursday afternoon in London. So it worked out well. Everybody was able to stay dry.
Yeah, lovely. Yeah, good. Good to
Well, stay
have a
cool.
good
Stay cool and try this
Thank
weekend.
you. Yeah, have a good weekend. Keep posting on Facebook. Lovely photos of all your food adventure and your grandson. Always good, entertaining.
Very good. Yeah, last night he and I went to a place called Somi Somi in Little Osaka, and we enjoyed what is it called? It's called obong, which doesn't sound very Japanese. I don't know what obong is, but it's a pastry that's shaped like a fish with bean paste in it, and then it was with some sort of not uzu, but is it uzu, the flavor? It's a sweet potato purple ice cream, and so that's his favorite.
That sounds like a modern interpretation.
It's ube ice cream is the flavor. Ube, which I think is sweet potato, and it's purple, and so that's his favorite. So we sat on the.
Lovely.
We sat
How
on
is his chopsticks using?
He's quite good. He's good.
Oh,
So
excellent.
his favorite food is ramen. So he does do that with chopsticks, but it's he still has a ways to go. He's 3.5, so he's not quite ready.
Excellent. Oh, he looks bigger than 3.5. I didn't notice.
He's quite adult. Thank you for following that. I appreciate that.
Lovely, lovely. All right. Have a good weekend.
You too. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Jem, and you have a good weekend too. Are you finished for the day?
No, I think it's just Myla and Lowell not here today.
Oh, okay. Thank you for hanging on.
Yeah, see you later. Okay.
Take care. Bye-bye.